We're going to talk about unified data. Um, I think it'll be an interesting topic. A lot of you have probably come across some of the topics and probably troubles that I'm going to talk about. So let's jump into it. Too much data. I think one thing that we all can agree working in digital marketing is that there's a whole heap of data that's available to us. We work with so many different platforms, and I'm going to give you a few examples of what we at Indago face on a daily basis, pretty much. These are the platforms that we usually work with. On the left-hand side, you may or may not know some of these platforms. And on the right-hand side, these some of the platforms that our clients usually work with. A lot of CRM platforms up there like Salesforce, a lot of other analytics platforms as well. And some of our clients actually have a lot of have built proprietary platforms that they use internally. So you can see that there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a lot of platforms, and all of these platforms are collecting data separately. And that can cause, and it does cause, a lot of problems when it comes to measurement, when it comes to strategy and optimization as well. So that's too much data. Just a little nerdy joke. And as I was saying, there's the fact that we all work with so many different platforms causes a lot of problems and discrepancies. I think one of the big problems or I guess trouble that we face as an agency is just looking at different data sets between us and the client. For example, a lot of us work on Google Analytics, and a lot of you are probably familiar with this platform as well, or Adobe, or any other kind of analytics platform for that matter, which is usually or for an agency, the primary reporting tool. But for a lot of our clients, that is not the case. They look at their data internally across other platforms like a CRM tool, like a Salesforce, or any other kind of platform that they're using internally. There's a lot of problems or a lot of discrepancies within these different platforms in terms of how they track, how the data is collected and presented within these platforms. And there's always going to be the difference in how these platforms attribute all of this data back to various sources and mediums. Another kind of common theme that we've figured across our client base, and generally speaking, is a platform like Google Analytics, which is a primary measurement platform for marketers and advertisers, doesn't actually collect the primary conversion that is valid for a client. For example, we work with a lot of B2B businesses who generate leads, which then go into a CRM system like a Salesforce, where the sales team works on those leads, and these leads go through various statuses until it becomes, until it's actually discarded or becomes an actual sale. In Google Analytics, we usually collect and optimize data that is around the leads figure, and not necessarily anything else or anything beyond that step, which necessarily isn't the best thing to optimize towards and report on. So there's already this huge discrepancy between what we as marketers and advertisers observe between what the actual kind of business goal is. We've also come across occasionally issues where the sales team, which actually works on the CRM platforms like Salesforce or any other platform, overwrites data. So lead comes in, it may have information associated to the lead that's important for marketing and advertising purposes, like source and medium, and the sales team potentially overwrites that information for whatever reason it is, and that causes discrepancies as well. So I think these are some of the few common problems that we face, or discrepancies that we face on a regular basis, because there's just so many platforms and so much data lying around. So what is unified data? Unified data is basically the ability, or the vision, I guess, to create this single source of truth, whereby all the data is connected. All of these platforms which we just saw or spoke about collect data in a different fashion, in a different manner, in disparate sources. With unified data, the aim is to combine all these data sources into a single source of truth, into a single source of information or data, using a unique identifier or a unique key. And usually the identification of this unique key is something that holds back companies or organizations from coming to this end of creating this unified data set. There's a few ways that we can come to this kind of unified data set. But before we jump into it, we're going to talk about what some of the benefits of creating or actually putting some resource behind an exercise like this would be. As I mentioned previously, instead of working with 3 to 5 to 10 or whatever the number of data sources within an organization are, you work towards a single source of truth. And that is probably the biggest benefit of actually working towards this project or exercise. Everyone looking at the same data can have huge amounts of benefits in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of whatever campaigns or projects that you're running internally. Optimizing towards the metrics that matter. As I was saying, in a platform like Google Analytics, we usually don't really track the business goals per se, which can cause discrepancies and inefficiencies when it comes to planning, forecasting, etc. So having a single source of truth gives us the ability to work on metrics that actually add to the bottom line of the business. I think speaking from working in an agency environment, it definitely reduces the amount of friction and the back and forth that potentially all of us have faced in our lives working in digital. There's always conversations around improving performance, and unless and until we are actually tracking the right goals and measuring them properly, that conversation is always going to be a little bit undermined because we're not looking at the right thing. We've seen when we work towards the business goals and have this kind of unified data set created within an organization, it definitely leads to proactive decision making. You're no longer looking at the data in a reactive manner. It leads to better forecasting because you're actually looking at the business goals instead of just a conversion metric in Google Analytics, for example. And it does improve your budget allocation as well. So when it comes to allocating budgets and forecasting, the year or the quarter, or however the frequency within an organization works, having those business goals or having a unified data set does help in creating a much better budget allocation overall. So how can we get there? We're going to talk about a couple of approaches here. These are probably the most commonly used approaches towards creating a unified data set. The first one is using a platform-generated unique identifier. So if you remember, or if you recall, I mentioned that the key to creating a unified data set is for all these data sets to have some kind of a unique identifier that sits across all these data sets that can be used to join essentially all of them into a single source of truth or a single unified data set. The first approach is using, as I said, a platform-generated unique identifier. In this example, I've picked Google Analytics, but if you're working with Adobe or any other kind of analytics platform, the approach should be very identical. Google Analytics, for every user that comes to the website, generates something called a client ID. This client ID is persistent. It stays unless the user clears their cookies. It stays on for 24 months as standard. This unique identifier is unique per browser per device, so it wouldn't be unique per user. So if you were browsing once on desktop and another time on mobile, you'll have a couple of client IDs associated to it, which is a little bit of a drawback, but the ease of using this methodology does kind of overcome that that little drawback in using this methodology. So the idea here is that we capture this client ID in Google Analytics. The way to do it is actually relatively easy if you are using Google Tag Manager, which most companies these days are, especially if you're using Google Analytics. It's relatively easy to capture this client ID as a custom dimension in Google Analytics reporting. Once this Google Analytics client ID is available in your GA platform, it's a matter of then collecting this same client ID in your other data sets. So for example, speaking of a lead gen business, which is using Salesforce, if your forms are capturing all the lead information, you might want to create something like a hidden field that is also capturing the client ID. Again, this is a relatively easy exercise to do. Once that client ID is captured in the form, it will then be passed back into your CRM, like Salesforce in this example. So in this, once all of this is done and completed, you will essentially have two data sets with client ID being collected in both of them. This screenshot gives a quick overview of how the client ID looks like in GA. And as you can see the client IDs associating the keyword level information, which can prove quite valuable as well. So once you have all this information available in both the platforms, as I said, it's a matter of actually joining these two data sets in platforms like Tableau or Data Studio or any other visualization tool or reporting tool that you're using internally. Again, that exercise is also relatively easy. So this solution is actually implementable tomorrow if you're using Google Analytics. And if you are using Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, you should be leveraging this solution. Google Analytics cookies are set in the first party context, so there shouldn't really be any issues with collecting this information because they're not third party cookies anymore and haven't been for a while. So you're completely bypassing that sort of cookie conversation. As I said, the drawbacks are the client ID is not unique per user because it is different when you browse across different browsers or devices, but it's definitely better than nothing. And we've seen match rates of over 90%. So what that means is that the client IDs have been matched to over 90% of the data that sits in other platforms like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, for example. So it can be hugely beneficial. The other approach, which is a bit more robust and definitely more accurate than the Google Analytics solution, is is actually capturing a client-generated unique identifier. So think about a scenario where a website has some kind of an ID when that is distributed to a user when he or she creates an account. And then that account is used subsequently to log into whatever the platform is available on that particular website. When a user creates an account, more often than not, there'll be a unique identifier like a customer ID or a customer number of some sort that would be associated to that particular user. In this scenario, the process is exactly the same. You'll have to capture that particular customer number within Google Analytics, as we've done with the client ID as a custom dimension, and have it available within our Google Analytics reporting or any other analytics platform that you're using. And that same customer number should ideally be already collecting in your CRM. So because this number is website generated, it should all ideally be linked in, but if it's not, then it's simply a matter of collecting that information in other data sources that you are willing to, or you're wishing to actually connect to your marketing data sitting in Google Analytics. There's a couple of benefits that are definitely worth thinking about. The first is because this ID is website generated and is unique per customer, it would stay with the customer, despite the fact that they might be using different devices or different browsers. So if I created a website, if I created an account on a website that sells, I don't know, like phones, for example, that customer number that is associated to me is going to be the same, irrespective of whether I log in or visit the website using a mobile or a desktop or a Safari or a Chrome, for example. So that is a huge benefit, because that kind of bypasses the limitations that the client ID has, whereby it's not unique per user. The other benefit, and probably the obvious one, is that this is something that is generated by the client, by the website. It is your own data. In the Google Analytics or the other platform solution, we are still relying on a third-party platform to do an exercise that can be quite essential and quite beneficial overall, and can lead to positive business outcomes. So you'd rather have all your infrastructure controlled by you and not have any kind of third-party reliance in place. But obviously, for a lot of us, or for a lot of the websites and clients out there, this particular client-generated solution isn't going to be possible. And for scenarios like that, the Google Analytics client ID solution works perfectly. And again, as I said, if that's something that you're in a position to do, you should definitely be exploring that option. This is something that we did with one of our clients who does personal loans. In this scenario, the unique identifier was something called a loan ID that's generated every single time a person takes out a loan, which we match back to the paid campaigns that we ran for them. And the amount of insights and the level of insights that we were able to derive from doing something like that was hugely beneficial. The last topic is just around what can we do with this data. Once you have this unified data exercise happening, obviously there's not going to be any kind of immediate actions, because depending on how or what the scale of the data is for that particular website, maybe you're getting thousands and thousands of conversions a day, and you can build up a data set relatively quickly. But it's not going to be the case for a lot of people. So the first step is actually just wait patiently and build up a data set that we can analyze and derive some level of insights from. Usually it takes anywhere between a month to 3 months to build up a data set that you can analyze and derive further insights from. And as I was saying, the level of insights that you can pick out are enormous, and definitely can be used as business cases to do interesting, cool stuff moving forwards. You can do customer lifetime value analysis that is currently kind of possible in platforms like Google Analytics, but definitely not to the accuracy of what you can do once you have this unified data set available to you. You saw in the previous examples that we were able to associate a sale or the end conversion, the conversion that matters to the business, to a keyword. And once you have built up a data set with hundreds of keywords being associated to the final business conversion, you can analyze your keywords in your search campaigns at that level, and that can be hugely beneficial. If you're using bidding strategies in paid solutions, which is a pretty common theme these days, these bidding strategies are only going to be as good as the data that's being fed to them. If you're feeding them lead level data rather than sales level data, they'll obviously optimize towards leads, whereby you might be in a position where you're getting lots of leads, but the quality of leads is poor. So to tackle that, this can be a solution that you can put in place. You can do repeat rate and churn analysis. The screenshot on the right hand side of the slide is a piece of analysis that we did for this personal loans client, looking at repeat and new business, and we found some interesting insights in how repeat behavior is different from new user behavior per channel, and we were able to implement some interesting strategies based on this information. You can do attribution level analysis as well, which again is possible in Google Analytics to an extent, but not to the level that you can do once you have this unified data set in place. The one other benefit of using Google Analytics, or any other platform for that matter, is that you can upload your CRM data back into all these platforms, whereby you can have full visibility of your business really in a platform like Google Analytics, and then use that information or that data to build custom models, audiences, which you can push back into other platforms, and so on. So the benefits of doing this exercise are huge. I think it's an often overlooked kind of category, or it kind of gets pushed back into the too hard to do basket. But from experience, the Google Analytics or even the other solutions are actually relatively easy to implement, and you should definitely be exploring these. I think that's the end of the presentation.